All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the March Lunch and Learn. We are excited to see everyone here on the call today. I've gone ahead and put in the chat the link to the TEIS Community Resource website. That is where you can find all the previously recorded Lunch and Learns. The PowerPoints and the recordings can be found there. So that is in the chat for you all to reference. We are really excited about this Lunch and Learn today. We have Jessica Beaver with the Therapy and Learning Center, and she's going to share some great information on conscious discipline. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to her. Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks, Emily. How's everybody? I hope y'all have sunshine out your window like we have here. But as Emily shared, my name is Jessica Beaver. I'm currently the program manager for the education side of the Therapy and Learning Center. To give you a brief overview of our center, we are an ERA and also one of the eligibility agencies for the West Tennessee region with TEIS, but we're also a vendor that provides speech PT and OT in a clinic-based setting. And so we've been around for 20 plus years, long time. And I actually, prior to working here at the Therapy and Learning Center, I was also part of Child Care Resource and Referral. And that's where I got introduced to conscious discipline as an inclusion specialist. And when I took the program manager position here at the Therapy and Learning Center, at the time we had an inclusive childcare, and conscious discipline became a consistent model of behavior management that we used within our center. And so not only have I been trained on it, but I've actually seen it in practice and see how well it works. So we're going to dive in and get started. And at any time, if y'all have a question, like unmute, ask yourself, feel free to interrupt. There's going to be a couple of times that we put things in the chat. I'm not going to be able to see that. So Emily's going to let me know what's being put in there. And we're going to dive right in. So what I hope for y'all to gain today, and let me preface this too by saying, typically if I was to do a conscious discipline training, this would be about a 6-hour training. So we are trying to squeeze a lot of information into an hour. And so today really is going to be an overview about the conscious discipline model, with also leaving you a little bit of nuggets as far as to carry with you to be able to share with families, but to actually dive in on all the principles and carrying it out, we would have to extend this training into some subsequent sessions to be able to give you the full layout. But what I do hope for us to gain today is the 4 brain smart principles that foster permanent changes in behavior. And I know when you see the word permanent, people are going to be like, wow, okay, this is the one-stop shop, fix all, everything. And it's not that it's really that, but it's a model that's going to train you to be able to recognize the states of the brain, how to respond, and things like that. And that's what leads to that permanent change in behavior. It's a brain model that helps us stop the do as I say, not as I do. I'm sure many of you, when you think back to discipline and punishment in your home, a lot of times it might have been that fear-based discipline, like, you better do this, don't make me have to get up and spank you, or, things like that. And so it was a fear-based approach a lot of times. I remember my granddad saying one time, like, you're either going to fear me or respect me. And so it was one of those balance as far as how things went. And this is not like that at all. Conscious discipline is really based on internal self-regulation on both a caregiver standpoint that in turn is carried over into the child. And so that's where we're going to gain an understanding of the relationship between brain function and behavior. And that's really going to be a core focus of today as we really talk about the different states of the brain and what comes from those states and where they're at and what it looks like when those children and yourself are in those brain states. And then we're going to learn how to access our own wisdom so that we can respond instead of reacting. And we all know that the best way to teach and change a behavior is to not be impulsive and reactive, but to be responsive and guiding. And so hopefully after today, you'll have some tips on ways to help do that. So before we dive into those, I wanted to do a check-in. And so I'm going to ask yourself, if you could, think about your energy level right now. And on a scale of 1 to 10, meaning like 1, you're still in bed in your head, making sheet angels, like nestled up, or 10, you're on go. Like, I'm so pumped and ready to learn right now. I'm beside myself. So throw in the chat a number. It's okay. You're not going to be judged or anything. If you're still in bed, that's fine. Hopefully, I'll get you to nestle the covers down just a little bit before we're done.
It is across the board, Jessica. I don't see anything really lower than a 5. But we got lots the 5 through 9s. I've seen maybe a 10. So the range I would say is from 5 to 9.
Great. And what about your focus level? I'm scattered, or I'm like laser beam. I don't have papers in front of me. I'm ready. I'm just zoned in on you, or I'm kind of doing 5 things at once. So where's your focus level at?
I saw some lower numbers there. I did see a 3, a couple of 3s, some 5s, 7s. At this point, I don't see anything lower than a 3, so the range is a little bit bigger this time.
Okay. And then last, your emotional state. Ask yourself right now, do you feel anxious or agitated? Or are you just peaceful as can be and calm? I was sharing with Emily earlier, I was a little anxious a few minutes ago before getting on there because I had a busy morning, and I was having to get myself to regroup and calm down a little bit. So where's your emotional state at right now?
This is very similar to the first one. Lowest I'm seeing right now is 5, anywhere from 5 up into 9. There's a 4. I do see a 4, an 8, 7, kind of across the board as well.
Right. It's hard to be a 10 and peaceful when we're at work, right? We're not we're not in our happy place laid out on the beach. Okay, so what I want us to do now is I want us all to close our eyes and take a few deep breaths, just slow, deep breath. And as you're taking those breaths, I want you to shift your attention to your chest. I want you to feel your chest rising, those deep breaths down into your belly, and try to pace your breaths to where they're slow and even. And now I want you to take a deep breath in and hold it. 1, 2, 3, and exhale. And now, as your eyes are still closed, shift your awareness in your mind to your arms, from your shoulders all the way down to your fingers. Lift your shoulders up, drop your arms down by your side into your lap. Take some breaths. Now I want you to squeeze your fist and tense your arms all the way up to your shoulders. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, and release. And now gently squeeze your legs and your waist with that slow, steady breathing. Squeeze. 1, 2, 3, release. And then last, your mouth, your teeth, your jaw. That's where we tend to grit when we're anxious, but just release And now take 2 more deep breaths and open your eyes. And now let's check in again. Where would you put your energy level now? Still in bed or ready to go?
Numbers are a lot higher this time. 8s, 9s, 7. Someone before did say same as above, but a lot of the numbers have increased.
And your focus level?
Got the same kind of trend going. The numbers do seem to be higher. So everyone seems to be a little bit more focused.
And your emotional state.
Very similar trend. Lots of 9s, 8s, a couple 10s, some 7s. So I think we are feeling a little bit more energized and focused and less anxious.
Great. So everybody just did conscious discipline training over. We're done. I'm teasing. But this is part of what we're going to talk about today. Making those brain shifts in order to regroup ourselves to where we can be at the focus level and the emotional state where we need to be. So we're talking about conscious discipline. So what is it? It's an evidence-based, comprehensive, multidisciplinary self-regulation program. Wow, a lot of words, right? So what does that actually mean? Conscious discipline was developed by Dr. Becky Bailey.
Jessica, I think you accidentally muted. Can you hear me? There you go. Perfect.
Back? Okay.
You're back.
What was the last thing you heard?
I heard Dr. Bailey.
Okay. So it was developed by Dr. Becky Bailey. And what conscious discipline does, it integrates discipline with self-regulation by using a brain-based approach to help children and adults develop self-control and understand their emotional intelligence. The brain-based approach, it's rooted neuroscience. It focuses on how different parts of the brain functions under stress and how to shift our brain to a focus, a place of problem solving and resolve to where we can be responsive. It's always going to be, and this is what I can't stress enough, it's always adult first, child second. And a lot of people go, okay, but we're molding a child's behavior. Why would it be adult first? But the reason for that is because in order for us to be the best version of ourselves, to guide our children to where they need to be and to be models of appropriate brain states, regulation, and those kind of things, we have to be in check ourselves. We have to be in the right place to be able to manage and control and help guide those behaviors. Now my it's frozen. Okay. So the best exercise for the brain is exercise. We know that when we're moving, that increases blood flow, delivers oxygen and nutrients to the brain, and that helps stimulate the release of those neurochemicals that will enhance our ability to learn and memorize and also impact our mood. The second brain smart principle, and this is probably my most favorite one. When I'm working with parents and families and caregivers or child care providers at the time, I always stress this principle, and that is that our brain is pattern seeking and it's survival oriented. Our brain thrives on predictability and routines, right? When we're in homes, we stress that often. Children need to know what to expect next, what's going to happen, what's comfortable. This is my bed. I know this is what I do. We want their brains to have consistent routines, and actions because our brain is pattern seeking. It helps children feel safe and engaged. Um, and children that live in chaos as adults will seek chaos. I always share that I was raised by a military dad who was very type A and everything had its place and organized and things like that. If you want to see anxiety come through the roof with me, put me in an uncontrolled setting where nobody knows what they're doing. We can't make a decision. It's utter chaos and I don't know how to perform. I'm just stressed and I can't, my brain doesn't focus and it's very difficult. And that's because our brain is pattern seeking and my brain is seeking the environment and the upbringing and everything that I had. And then the other one that's one of my most favorite is connections on the outside is what's going to foster connections on the inside. And we practice that as developmental therapists every day. That's one of the reasons we set the stage and do that check-in. We're wanting to establish and build those connections with our parents and caregivers that we work with and with that child because we want them to trust us and we want them to feel safe. Positive relationships and social bonds are going to strengthen that self-regulation and emotional intelligence. We can do that as simple with using eye contact, touch, presence, playfulness to activate the brain, and to get to shift to that prefrontal cortex where we know everything good comes from. I often think about this video that was used in college, and I'm sure those of us that have been in the field for the long time has seen this multiple times, but the video of where the baby was in a bouncy seat or a car seat on the table with her mom in front of her, and the mom was engaging the little baby, talking like, hey, and using a soft, playful voice and exaggerated facial expressions, and the baby was smiling and cooing back, and you see that she's in a peaceful, calm state. And then all of a sudden, the mom changes her affect, doesn't even, it's like she's looking through the baby. She's not talking to her anymore. She's not making peaceful sounds. She's not engaging with eye contact. And you notice that baby begins to become like stressed. They try to do what they were doing to get that positive interaction. And then when the parent still doesn't respond, you can see the baby becoming anxious. And next thing you know, the baby's crying. And it's not until mom re-engages with those positive eye contacts, facial expressions, gentle touches, that connection is reestablished. And you could see that baby calmed down, which leads to the fourth principle. The brain functions best when it feels safe. And you can think about a time when you were scared, whether it was because you heard a noise outside, you were in a traffic accident. I mean, anything like that. Think about a time when you were scared and anxious, and could your brain process really what was going on? And so we have to make sure that children feel safe and engaged and connected in order for their brain to function optimally the way that we would like for it to. So let's talk about the brain. We all know that the front part of the brain, I often tell people, like, make a fist, hold your thumb like you're holding up the number 4, and then cover your brain, your hand up. And so the top part of the brain, the frontal lobe, the executive part, that's the CEO, the boss, the good part of the brain. Everything good happens when we're in the front of our brain. As you start to open that up, you come to the limbic system. That's the blue spot that you see on the picture here. That's our emotional state. Okay, that's where all of our emotions and feelings come from. And then the red part, your thumb, that's the brain stem. That's where we're in the survival state. And so those are the 3 primary brain systems and states that we're in. And we're going to dive into those each specifically. Okay, so the brain stem. All right, that is associated with the survival state. That's where that child's going to be in that fight or flight mode where they hide. So that elopement, it is the very basic level of brain functioning. This state becomes activated when a person feels physically threatened, they're unsafe, or extreme stress. What that's going to look like is a child with that tantrum, aggression, withdrawal, hitting, fighting, biting. It's the primary concern at this point is for safety. And that's why all of these things happen, because that child is in their brainstem. They're trying to find that place of safety, and they can't. Nothing's good's happening there. My daughter, who's 23 to this day, will tell me if I'm in my brainstem or not. But nothing good happens there, and there's not any rational thought or reasoning. So imagine a parent in their brainstem and a child in their brainstem, what that's going to look like. It's literally a train wreck waiting to happen. And this is the basic function, but this is what's the most developed part of the brain when a baby is born. So through those first years of life, that brainstem is the only part that's really fully developed at that time. And so the next part of the brain is the limbic system, the emotional part. That's the center part. It's getting its highest level of development in those middle school years. Everybody always talks about middle school kids being, that's when they're emotional and everything is such a big deal and social groups are important and all of those things. That's because that part is developing at its heightened level during those ages. I hate to say this, but women, this is where we tend to live, is in that emotional state of our brain. This is where we're seeking connection. A person in their limbic system is seeking validation. They want to feel that they are appreciated. That's it's where it's logic over survival. So they're not in that fight mode, but we're in our feelings. This is where that child is going to, when a kid feels like they made a mistake and then all of a sudden they just want to run and get that hug and everything. And sometimes you'll hear a parent go, don't hug me now. You just made that mess, but they really are seeking that connection, that sense of belonging, that emotional validation at that time. And like I said, they are beginning to find some place of logic during here. But as they get older, so when you think about behavior, an infant cries, right? And then you get to the 1-year-old, that's where that biting typically happens, those kind of things, those temper tantrums, we fall out. By 2 or 3, you're pushing, shoving. And then when you get to 4 or 5, it's you're not my friend, right? And that's because they're shifting into that more emotional state, that limbic system part of their brain. A cultural upbringing, the environment of the house is really going to impact how this part of a brain functions for a child. Those, think about those early childhood theories like trust versus mistrust and how important it is on when that's established versus when it's not. So a loving, non-traumatic, more calm environment is really going to help this emotional state meet its greatest potential. Like I said, as an adult, what this looks like is like, do you know what I do for you? I just spent all day cleaning this up and you came in here and messed it up, and I worked all day and this is so hard, and y'all don't even care that you messed up this, and my feet hurt. I mean, and so it's where they're in that emotional part, and you're going to see whining, crying, jealousy, frustration, emotional outburst, and stuff during this state of emotional state and brain state. Then the great part, the executive state, the frontal lobe. Now we know this isn't fully developed until our 20s, right? And even in boys, a lot of times it's not until our late 20s. And so we know it takes a lot of work to get us to be able to use this part. And I often tell people this, like, we get upset when children can't communicate what's wrong and they have all these feelings and emotions and behavior happening. Well, we're not even using that good part of our brain until our 20s, but we expect a 2-year-old to be able to do it and make the right choices all the time and behave. And so this is where all good problem solving can take place. Like I said, it's the CEO of the brain. It's the boss. It is the part of the brain that's responsible for problem solving, self-regulation, and rational thinking. So it's not until we're in this part of our brain that we can be rational and be able to problem solve and figure out what we need to do. This is the ideal state for learning and decision making and cooperation. This is those beautiful moments when you're with your child or your partner, your spouse, your anybody, and everything just goes beautifully. Everybody's both in their good, happy executive part of their brain. It's governed by that prefrontal cortex up there in the front. Behaviors for this is, like I said, this is when they're going to follow those instructions. I need you to pick these up, please. And they pick them up. And, or when they're upset because their friend took their toy and you're able to say, well, what should we do if you want that? How should we be able to get that toy back? What can we do? When they're in that state, we can develop that problem solving and guide that. All that sounds great, right? Well, we have to build those connections. That's where the work comes in, okay? So the cortiolimbic connections, this is all the scientific stuff, refers to those neural pathways that are connecting our prefrontal lobe with the limbic system of our brain, okay? And again, we know that we have to help children get there, right? So what does all these fancy words mean? These are the crucial for integrating cognition and emotion to be able to regulate behavior. Okay, we have to get people to be able to recognize where they're at and make those appropriate shifts to where we can do the positive work. They will enable a person to override impulses from that lower state of the brain and then make connections with other people and giving connections through eye contact, touch, and presence. The more disconnected you are, the greater distance between knowing and doing. This is why I tell people it is adult first, child second. We have to be able to move ourselves from the lower centers of our brain to the higher centers. We're adults that self-discipline. Helping a child be able to move from the lower centers of their brain to the higher center of their brain, that's conscious discipline. So how can we do some of that? One of the things that we often hear from parents is, I can't get them to do this. This is so hard. I don't know what to do. And Becky Bailey uses a quick method called the Q-tip method, which is quit taking it personally. Behavior is not happening to you. It's happening in front of you. And we all know, every one of us knows that behavior is always a form of communication, right? When you think about those functions of behavior, we know that they're either trying to get access to something or they're trying to escape something they don't want to do, whether it's through avoidance. I don't want to eat, and so I'm going to go run to my room. Or I want that cookie, I'm trying to get access to it, I throw myself down on the floor. And so we want to make sure that we always recognize that behavior is always communication. That child is trying to tell us something, whether it's that they don't feel safe, that they don't know what to do, and they don't know how to fix it. Because if they knew how to fix it, they would do it, right? And so we want to make sure that parents recognize and understand that in order to change and curb behavior, we have to take a mind shift as a parent. Um, when a child acts out, they're communicating that need. They're not doing it to make your day harder or to slow you down or things like that. They're trying to communicate something that they are not able to at this stage in their life. Taking behavior as something personal, that's going to trigger emotional responses from you as the caregiver, from you as the adult. It's going to lead to being frustrated. And in an adult interaction, one adult to another, is you might become defensive and not willing to hear what the other person says and not recognizing their feelings. Um, if we can stay calm and within ourselves and in the right place in our brains, then we're able to guide children through their emotional regulation. We know kids learn by what they see, and it goes back to that pattern seeking part of the brain. If I know that the best way to get what I want is to constantly throw a fit, when I want something, what am I going to do again? Or on the same sense of, I know I can keep ignoring and not doing what my mom asked until she gets to the point of raising her voice and yelling at me, then guess what? Later, I'm going to continue going, okay, is I can keep going until I get to this point, because my pattern seeking brain recognizes that it's not until that voice gets raised or things like that that I have to stop. And so, in order to get parents to not take it personally, we want them to pause and breathe. Just come back within their self, like we did at the beginning of this. We want them to be able to learn and recognize the state that their child's in. Again, helping them understand which behaviors come from which part of the brain. If they're having that tantrum and kicking and throwing, they're at their brain stem, and we need to recognize that we got to help shift them forward. If we're not in the right brain spot, and we're not going to be able to do that and guide our kids. And then making sure that we stay calm and connected. And y'all, I know this is so hard. When I used to do this training for CCR&R, I always joked and said it came up when I needed a brain shift as a parent, because I needed to hear all this all over again, because I would train about things that I was like, man, I really just did that like 2 days ago with my kid. Because we all know we have those moments where you walk away as an adult, whether it's an encounter with your spouse, your friend, your sister or brother, or your parent or your child, where one minute you walk away and you're like, heck yeah, I rocked that. Like, I handled that situation so good. And then other times you're like, yeah, that was an epic fail. Like, I didn't handle that well, and my child didn't respond well. And those typically, especially like now that mine's 23, that's usually the time that you have to sit down and go back to your kid and go, you know what, I didn't really handle that the best way, and I'm sorry, and kind of talk about it. But we want parents to be able to be within themselves so that we can reframe that behavior for that child. And that means reframing our thought. Instead of being like, they're so disrespectful, or they're not being nice to me, they're having a hard time. What do I need to do to help them? And then to teach what we want versus punishment. And we all know that discipline teaches lifelong skills. Punishment just addresses it right at the second, and it goes back to that fear-minded discipline. And we know that using fear tactics, a child doesn't do something because they're either scared they're going to get punished, they're scared of failure or disappointment. I don't want to disappoint them, so it's really not self-regulation. I'm just scared that I don't want to make my mom or dad mad. That loss of love or abandonment. I sit there and I think about how many times I've heard, if you don't get your shoes on, I'm leaving. And so they're putting their shoes on not because you asked them to put their shoes on. They're putting their shoes on because they're scared of being left alone, right? And so really what they're doing is out of a reaction of fear, not out of following instructions and doing what their parent asked them to do. So going back, is anybody have any questions? I feel like I've thrown a lot at you. Are we at a good pace? Is there anything else?
You're doing great. I don't see any questions right now.
Okay.
But yeah, you're doing great, Jessica. You're right on time. And I will let you know if any questions pop in the chat.
Okay. All right. So how do we help someone that's in that survival state where they're in that brainstem? First and foremost, we want to focus on safety. We want to make sure that when they're in that state of mind, that they're not in a position that they can harm themselves or others. If that kid is having a tantrum in the middle of the floor and there's not anything that is going to fall on them or that they can get access on to hurt themselves or things like that, we're going to want to leave them in there right there. But we want to get them to make sure to clear out space, because we all know in the middle of that tantrum, we are not going to get any reasoning at that time. You cannot get a child to stop having that tantrum just by saying, you better stop. I mean, think about a time when you were crying or upset and somebody was like, don't cry. Are you able to shut your tears off right then? No, most of the time, if I'm crying and somebody hugs me, I'm going to cry more, right? And somebody says, you better stop crying. I'm like, I didn't want to cry to begin with. I'm not going to be able to stop. But you want to focus on safety first. And then you're going to want to use grounding techniques. Like, you're going to want to make sure that you're talking to them calm, that you make the space around them safe and calm. If a child can tolerate it, you would provide that gentle touching, like maybe rubbing their back, things like that. You're going to want to model calmness, taking deep breaths. And y'all, when a kid's throwing a tantrum or hitting or kicking, we know we have to do that, right? And then we want to avoid trying to reason with them. It's not, when you think about even some of the triad behavior trainings, they talk about when that kid goes back there and you're like, when you calm down, we can try again. And you're not going to use those directives like calm down, but you're going to go, I see that you need a minute. I see that you're upset. I'm going to let you be upset right now. And when you're okay, we'll talk or we'll come back. This is also when you think about, and Emily, you might get to help remind the training it was, but when we talked about like the different trauma and brain states, like through delivery and stuff like that, and recognizing like our heartbeat when we're holding a baby, that's what this is talking about. I think about that infant that is crying so hard because they're ready to eat. And if you're like ignoring them, or if you're going, I know you're hungry, I'm getting it, and using a soft tone, or when that baby's crying and you don't know why, like if you put them on your chest and your heart's beating fast and you're breathing hard and you're anxious, you're in turn sharing that angst onto that kid. And then again, it goes back to that pattern seeking piece. I mean, if you're sitting there and that kid's just out of control and you're bouncing and you're overstimulating and all that, they're going to seek that overstimulation to calm later. And so that's why it's important, like they shared in that Lunch and Learn a couple months ago, on making sure that we remain calm, that our body can transfer that over into that infant. Also with our toddler, that we're using calm, soft voices. And then we're going to offer simple, clear choice. That first and then model that so many of us use, first dinner, then cookie, or first eat, then outside. Oh, you're all done? All done, clean up. Short choices, this or that, first or then. You can sit here or you can sit there. And we're going to help them. But again, you cannot get co-regulation when they're in the midst of that fit, or you're not in the good headspace. The emotional part. Again, like I said, y'all, women, this is where we tend to live. But this is where you're going to want to build that connection. You're going to reestablish it, use eye contact, that gentle voice, the presence to reassure them. This is where you want to acknowledge their feelings. You want to say, I understand that you're upset. I see that you're angry that you can't have your cookie right now. I know it made you sad that they took your toy. And then you want to label that so they start recognizing what their feelings mean. And let them know it is okay. I often tell people when everybody's like, you have to share, and we get upset when toddlers don't want to share. But guess what? I don't always want to share. If I have one last bite of tiramisu cheesecake, which is my favorite, and my husband is like, you're going to eat that. Are you going to eat that? I want to like gobble it up real fast because I know he's really just wanting a bite and I don't want to share it. And so this is where it's okay to say it's fine that you feel this way. And it's okay that you didn't want to share that. But what could we do? You're going to, like I said, name that emotion. You're going to model that self-regulation. And then that's where you're going to start leading them into that problem solving. And ways to build problem solving is giving jobs, letting them have choices. Even though you're giving them two choices, it still makes them feel like they have a sense of control in a little bit of that. And they're able to think, what do I want? And tell you what I want. But then as a parent, you're still kind of guiding that. A strategy I've used before for kids on what to wear is put church clothes on a red hanger and play clothes on a blue hanger, and go pick out anything on the blue hanger. And then you don't have to worry about them wearing their church clothes to play in, or vice versa, or things like that. But allowing them to have jobs and choices and cooperation and those kind of things so that they feel connected. We want them to clearly feel safe to be able to make those positive choices and to feel like that they're able and that they can communicate and talk about their feelings. And then again, the good part, the CEO. This is where you're going to see that positive intent. Oh, you wanted ... whatever it is. This is a place for natural consequences. Letting those natural consequences take place. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean, let a child touch a hot stove and the natural consequence is they burn their finger and it hurts. We want to keep them safe, but it is good to have those natural consequences here. Because we want to be able to model that problem solving and help them figure out some solutions and what can we do. Again, those first, then, this, that. And then problem solving. Okay, he has the blue truck, and you want the blue truck. Are there more trucks? Can we help find a truck? Can we find a truck to see if he would share that to give you the blue one back? Obviously, these are going to be a little bit more geared towards our 4 and 5-year-old kids, and then often later, even deeper into those problem solving skills. But you can use picture schedules for this. You can even make little pictures to help them go through their tool bank to decide what's the best solution, and help them be able to create that problem solve, because we all know the same reason why when we're with parents, we go through that problem solving phase and then that reflection piece. Why do we do that? Because we know if we empower the parent and it's their idea and they help us in that, they're more apt to carry that intervention over when we're not there, right? So what we're doing with them, we want to do with our kids. And we have to model that and teach that. So to do this, we have to be able to recognize where we're at. So if I realize I'm in my emotional state, or if I'm in my brainstem, which we've all been there, then I know I need to stop and do something to refocus to get me to where I need to be. So we can help the child. And to do this is most parents need to know what their trigger is. There are certain things that are immediately going to put that parent not in the best brain state. So put in the chats, what are some triggers for you? For me was whining. I could not stand when my daughter would whine. It's like, if you whine, I can't hear you. That was like nails on a chalkboard for me. But what are some behaviors that you think are triggering either for yourself or for our parents?
Someone said hanging on my leg. Whining is another one that's come through. Falling out.
It's funny, falling out never bothered me, but and I don't know why. I was just like, okay, if you want, I mean, don't you wish as an adult we could like lay in the floor and throw a fit as an adult? I mean, I don't know. But I get it. I mean, because you're just like, oh my gosh, get up. But whining was it still is. When I'm helping parents with discipline and that kid is whining, I'm just like, oh my gosh, can we talk about how to make this stop? But some parents, it doesn't bother them.
We've got a lot of whining, screaming, tantruming, constant touching. One for me that I know I can relate to is throwing. I saw throwing listed, and that's a big one for me. Someone else just mentioned throwing. Negotiating when I'm on low sleep, ignoring me when I know he hears me, hitting. A lot of triggers being put in, outright
Yes.
refusal to cooperate, the constant why.
Yep.
Lots.
And so like what Emily just said, there's a lot. So what triggers one person can be different for somebody else. Some triggers for kids are this is probably one of the biggest triggers for my daughter and my husband, but physical discomfort. So like somebody said, sleepy or hungry. I mean, when my daughter is hungry, she is hangry. And so she does not like to be hungry, and that puts her in a bad mood. Lack of sleep. For some of our kids, it's that overstimulation. It's too loud. There's too much going on. And when I'm overstimulated in that state, that for that person, they do not know how to get out of that brainstem. That's why a lot of our kids do that sensory seeking stuff, right? They're trying to self-regulate and calm their bodies down. Somebody said this one while ago, some emotional stress, feeling ignored or unheard. Do you hear me talking to you? Yeah, that's a big one. Failure is oftentimes can put somebody in that brain state and survival state. Unmet expectations, feeling embarrassed or shamed. If I'm embarrassed, I'm probably going to shut down. I'm going to do that escape, that run away. Lack of control. Being told no with no explanation can cause that trigger. Rules with no choices. Feeling powerless in a situation. Like I said, lack of control when I'm with a group of people and it's like, hey, where do we want to go for lunch? And nobody can make a decision. Like it immediately shifts me to my brainstem and I'm just like, okay, can somebody just pick, please? And I start getting frustrated because I'm not in control of that situation. My staff that are on here would tell you that I like control. Unexpected changes. That's my husband. He cannot stand change. He is the most routine human being I've ever met. And there's a lot of kids like that those transitions are hard and it puts them in a place that they can't self-regulate. And then, those social triggers, like especially in a preschool classroom with their friends and their peers, And then we also know there's those sensory triggers, and that goes back to sound and light and what we smell and what we hear. And I might like being touched, but this person might not, and all of those things. And so it's important that we recognize what those triggers are for our children, help parents understand what those triggers are, and recognize, because once they recognize those triggers and can anticipate them or see when they're happening, then they're going to be able to quickly respond before it gets so elevated that they might not can bring them back down. I have thrown a ton of information at you super, super fast. And again, in order to do conscious discipline, we would really need to dive into like composure, encouragement, assertiveness, choices, positive intent. She breaks all of those down. And if y'all like this and want more about that, then maybe we can do that. But empathy, those kind of things. But I wanted to try to give everybody at least the foundation. And so we're going to practice super quick because I know we got about like 8 minutes, I think. And somebody can unmute, but think about your last discipline or behavior encounter and what state, tell us about it. And then what state do you believe that child was operating from? And what state do you think that parent might have been operating from? Anybody? Okay, I know when we're in we're all dealing with some discipline and behavior.
I think somebody might have did somebody unmute to tell a story? I thought I heard somebody.
Did.
Yes, please go ahead.
I was just gonna say I had a kiddo who was throwing his cup everywhere. And once he would throw it, he would try and hit mom after. And mom was getting very, very flustered, very not aggravated, but almost aggravated and annoyed in a way. But she was working from a state of constant tiredness. She works night shift, and so she was exhausted. He was overstimulated because of the environment that they were in, and he was exhausted and off his routine. And so having that tiredness was a big thing for them.
So you could recognize where state she was in. Rob, I think you raised your hand.
I did. I just want to make sure I wasn't cutting anyone off here, because I know, the majority of people here, and what this topic is about is basically parents not being in the right state of mind. But yesterday I was in a situation where this child, he wasn't diagnosed autism yet, but we pretty much have a good idea that he's very sensory seeking behavior, biting, trying to squeeze, just no rhyme or reason to it, just very sensory, try different textures, different things. Um, strategies were being presented as kind of like a de-escalation, sensory replacement, things like that. The mom was, I don't know how she did it. She was super. So she really came from a place of almost too accepting of it, where it was like, I'm, I mean, this woman, honestly, she's been waiting supposedly on the list to get evaluated by Vanderbilt for almost 2 years. Uh, I don't know. I think it's a slight exaggeration, but anyway, she's been, quote, putting up with it for so long that it's like, oh, Rob, what could I do? Well, let's try this. And of course, trying not to talk to mom too much, because even that verbal interaction is distracting the child, getting more attention and everything else. But the parent was just like, it was impressive to me that she wasn't losing it. But on the other hand, she was almost too accepting of that. well, this is what he does, and this is my normal. This is my state of normal. And I'm basically going, okay, this should not, I mean, I don't want to be judgy, at all,
Right.
but my God, I want to help you as much as I can.
But I think this is a perfect example that survival state.
Yeah, survival. That's a good way to put it.
Yes. So her kind of like, this is my life, this is my normal. I mean, she's, even though, we think, okay, frontal cortex, the good part of the brain, means we're always calm and all that. But in her case, that calm is her brainstem. I mean, it's her survival state.
Yeah.
It's like, I am just, because think about, we said that the survival state is that fight or flight or hide. And so she's pretty much gotten to a point of like, I can't, and it could also be that limbic part where she's just so emotionally drained that like I cannot allow myself to get worked up about this anymore.
I think that was it. I think I saw that. Like I'm done. I just, I can't, it was like, and when it was time for me to leave, and he got to a point where he was slightly de-escalated, but he wasn't over it. He was probably over the hump, but I could definitely see, if anything changed, I could definitely see him going back. And I felt really bad leaving. I was like, please let me know, I'm sorry. I felt very apologetic, she's like, no, this is it. We're good.
Right.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
I think that's a perfect example, Rob. Thank you for sharing that, because it is, like I said, a perfect way to help people understand that even calmness sometimes is a survival state. Um, and but then being able to get them re-energized that's why we talked about at the beginning, checking in our energy level, our focus level, and our emotional state, because we've got to get all three of those in line to be able to tackle these hard issues with behavior. And we all know that most of the time behavior works for kids because parents a lot of times are too tired to deal with it, or the amount of work it takes to deal with it. But we also know that if we invest the time to mold it and change it, the outcome longer is better. Because one of the things Dr. Becky Bailey talks about when we get into composure and things like that is recognizing that what we do at 2 transfers even deeper into what we do at 5, and then to what we do at 12, to then in turn what it's going to look like for an adult. And a quick example of that is, for example, think about that limbic part, the emotional part of our brain. So that's where our emotions come from. That's where we feel happy or sad or things like that. So, like using food as a reward or punishment. Okay. So, like, if I'm going to use every time you have a great day at school, and I'm so proud of you, and I'm giving you all those emotional connections because I'm so happy for you, that we go get ice cream. And as an adult, when your brain releases those serotonin levels of feeling happy and proud of myself, this side of the brain is then going, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream. And so, I mean, think about certain things that we use to cope and handle things. And most of that is going to stem all the way back to our childhood. And so those are why it's so important to try to start building this self-regulation, so that the pattern seeking behaviors of our brain are where we can be self-regulated and appropriate and good, well-rounded, emotionally intelligent adults.
That's great feedback, Jessica. And thank you all for the engagement. I'm going to go ahead and just do a couple of housekeeping things before we wrap up. And then if anybody has any questions for Jessica after that, you guys can hang out for just a second. But wanted to let you all know that I have put the FormStack link in the chat. I put it in a couple of minutes ago. So if you're looking for it, over in your chat feature, there will be what looks like a push pin that will have my name beside it. If you click on that, it's pinned there and you'll be able to complete the FormStack link. Wanted to just let everybody know the Lunch and Learn that Jessica referenced, which has a lot of really wonderful information, was the 6 R's, implementing neurodevelopmentally informed early childhood services. And that was done by Allison Douglas, September of 2024. So if you all were interested in going back and referencing that, it really aligns with a lot of the content that Jessica shared today. So it's a great to supplement this. So keep in mind, all of the past Lunch and Learns can be found on the TEIS Community Resource website. That one will be available there. This Lunch and Learn will be available in a couple of days. Give us a couple of days to get it uploaded to the TEIS Community Resource website, but you will be able to find it there along with the PowerPoint presentation. And one last thing, just wanted to let you all know that the April Lunch and Learn will be on April 23rd, and we have TN Step back with us. They're going to share some information on building strong foundations for early literacy. So if you have any parents on your caseload that you feel that information would apply to, please promote it to them, help them navigate around the community resource website. Also, this Lunch and Learn that Jessica just completed, this is great information for us, but it's also really, really great information for parents. So if you have a parent on your caseload and you think this info really applies to them, let them know that it can be found on the community resource website. Thank you so much, Jessica. This has been a wealth of information that I think we can all implement professionally and personally. It's been really great. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute or put those in the chat. Thank you all so much for coming today.
Miss Jessica, I'm going to put something